The most popular political party among Australian women right now is not Labor. It's not the Greens, it's One Nation. Pauline Hanson, the woman they called a racist for 30 years, the woman they put in prison. She is now the most popular leader among the people the media told you would never support her. That is not a polling error. That is a population screaming that something is broken and that the political class still won't ask the obvious question. Not how do we stop her, but what did we do to make millions of Australians want her? That's the question they're terrified of, because the answer is an indictment of everything they've done for 30 years. Welcome to another episode of The Thomas Cut. Let me show you why people are walking away, not with opinions, with their own words. Before the last election, Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers looked Australians in the eye and made a promise. No changes to negative gearing. Watch this from the start.
Capital gains tax
Yes.
setting.
How hard is it
If
for the
re-elected-
50th time? Our position's very clear. It's not what we're doing.
I want you to say tonight, categorically, negative gearing is off the table.
Yeah, it's off the
I'll
table.
replay it again and then we'll
and
pause it
capital
right
gains tax
Yes.
setting.
How hard is it
If
for the
re-elected-
50th?
there for the 50th time. He said it, yes. How hard is it? For the 50th time. Then in May 2026 budget, he broke it. Negative gearing restricted to new builds only. The man who said how hard is it did the thing he swore he wouldn't do. That is not a politician changing his mind. That is a politician who thinks you're too stupid to remember what he said. Now I want to show you another clip from the response of Pauline Hanson. It's great.
See, the difference is
go.
that Angus Taylor has no vision for the future, and that's why he's picking up One Nation's policies. I'm the only one that's been speaking about vision for the future. I have been consistent for the past 30 years. You know, Labor talks about
Gotta
resilience.
love that shit sandwich.
That's their budget is about. To me, they've delivered a shit sandwich,
Pause
and
it
we've now
here.
got it.
She said Labor has delivered a shit sandwich in the federal budget, and we now have to eat it. She didn't say, I'm disappointed in the government's fiscal approach. She said it how millions of Australians are feeling. That's why people listen. She talks like a human being who just read their power bill. But that's just one broken promise. Let me tell you about another one. The one that should make your blood boil. Veterans. The budget paper said veteran compensation hit $50 billion. Sounds generous, right? Wrong. That's the headline they want you to read. The reality is buried in the fine print. They cut $779 million from veteran services, not next year, over the next 4 years. And they didn't stop there. They slapped a $5,000 annual cap on allied health. That means if you're a veteran who needs regular physio because your back is wrecked from carrying a pack for this country, too bad, you're rationed. Then there's the Solomon program, 125 years. Salvation Army chaplains walking through barracks, deployed bases, giving out hot cup of teas to soldiers having a rough day. The cost? $1.5 million a year. The defense budget? Over $50 billion. 1.5 million out of 50 billion isn't even pocket change. It's the lint that they pull out of their pocket. And they scrapped it. 50 billion for planes, submarines, and politicians travel. But they couldn't find 1.5 million to keep a chaplain with a kettle. It's disgusting. Invictus Australia, the organisation that got wounded veterans back on their feet through sport and rehab, had their federal funding completely withdrawn. Not reduced, $0. What's going on? $0. So let me get this straight. 779 million cut. Allied health capped at a level that will leave veterans in pain. The Solomon program, 1.25 centuries of service destroyed for the price of a Sydney parking spot. Invictus, the one thing broken soldiers gave soldiers a reason to wake up, defunded. And this is all happening while they are still processing the recommendations from the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide. A Royal Commission that only existed because so many veterans saw no way out and took their own lives. That's the setup. Now here's the punchline that makes it unforgivable. While they are cutting $779 million from the men and women who fought for this country, they found $42.5 million for HIV treatment for people that are not even eligible for Medicare. Another 42 million for HIV prevention medication. And then, just to make sure nobody was left out, they wired 266 million to the Global Fund to fight AIDS overseas. Now, I'm not saying people with HIV don't deserve treatment. What I'm saying is this: a government that can find nearly $100 million for non-citizen healthcare but can't find $1.5 million to keep the settlement program alive does not have a budget problem. It has a priorities problem. And it gets worse. The coalition's own numbers show some visa holders pay $126,000 less in tax than they receive in government services. Humanitarian visa holders, $400,000 less. Less. So they're taking money from a veteran with no cartilage left in his knees, and they're handing it to people who probably will never become citizens and will never pay it back. That's not governance. That's theft dressed up in a budget speech. And then they wonder why people are searching for alternatives.
Guarantee that you won't touch negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions.
Well, we have no plans to touch or change negative gearing. What we're concerned about...
Okay, 2 words there, no plans. Problem is, you've said this before.
Last night, one of the most shameless performances in all budget history. No shame at admitting that our young people face budget deficits until way into the next decade. No shame that gross debt will reach $1 million next year. I repeat, $1 million. Go and tell young people that. No wonder there were no revenue projections for the next 10 years. This mob will raise even more taxes. 77 billion net tax increases next year.
So where are they actually going, One Nation? And here's what they're actually selling, not the media caricature, the platform. Immigration and housing. One Nation has proposed a hard cap of 130,000 net overseas migration, roughly 1/3 of current levels. They want to ban foreign acquisition of new homes and force the sale of existing foreign-owned properties. Negative gearing stays, but limited to 2 homes per person, not unlimited portfolios while first home buyers sleep in their cars. Now, I want you to see the difference between how these two sides talk, not in a policy paper, but in real life.
Immigration, I don't think that too many people in the country. You high immigration, so we had the highest ever on record, we had people coming in 1,800 a day, just under 500,000 a year net migration coming into the country. Then on top of that, it is your foreign ownership. We've allowed people to come in here from other countries and buying up housing, and huge numbers that are foreign owned housing in Australia, which I'd put a stop to. Even your ownership of whether it's new or whether it's established housing, I wouldn't have foreign ownership, or of the land.
It's very important what you're saying.
So you can't own productive agricultural land in the hands of foreign ownership. So
pause it there. That's it. Foreigners who are not citizens should not own Australian homes. No consultant speak, no sustainable multicultural framework, just a sentence a tradie in Logan understands. Now watch the Prime Minister when he's asked about immigration and what he says. All right, here's the clip.
It's hard to escape the Prime Minister talking that a lot of the rise in One Nation support is the belief of people there's been too much migration from Islamic countries to these shores. There are fears that people of that faith might want to bring their conflicts here. What do you think of that analysis?
Well, I've said consistently, the Australian Covenant is that if people have any prejudice or hatred, it's left at the customs hall.
What is that? What is that as a response? She says, cap it, tie it to housing, stop foreigners buying our land. He says, nothing to see here. Keep working on social cohesion. One of them is talking about your rent. The other is giving a TED talk. You can debate whether 130,000 is the right number. Debate it. But here's what you can't debate. One Nation is the only party willing to name a number. The majors use words like sustainable and targeted, words that mean whatever they need them to mean that week. One Nation says, here's the cap, and that clarity is rocket fuel. Second, energy. They'll ditch net zero, exit Paris, axe the climate change department, saving $30 billion. But the real story is what Hanson did at the Australian Energy Producers Conference. She walked into a room full of oil and gas executives and proposed a Norway-style gas royalty. 10% wellhead royalty on new offshore gas. 30% equity stake for Commonwealth. Profits going to sovereign wealth funds for Australians.
Any profits made on Australia's equity ownership will be put into a sovereign wealth fund to reinvest and grow, not to be rorted by future governments. These ownership rights would be 100% owned by a new Commonwealth special investment vehicle, the Australian National Wealth Investment Corporation, or called ANWIC. ANWIC will direct its share of oil and gas to Australia's greatest benefit, selling to critical domestic industries like fertiliser production, energy and fuel refining.
That's not right wing. That's not left wing. That's Australian. Both major parties attacked it immediately because it threatened their cosy arrangement with multinationals. And third, veterans. I just showed you what Albanese did. One Nation made veterans a centerpiece. They led the Senate inquiry into the Defence Honour System and won. The government was forced to withdraw a bill veterans opposed. They pledged to hold defence leadership accountable and prioritise ex-service personnel. And let me tell you, abandoned people remember who showed up. When your opponents start copying your answers, you're not the fringe anymore. You're the agenda setter. Now let's zoom out and have a look at this. What if the major parties aren't falling by accident? What if they're actually doing what they're supposed to do for someone else? It's a fair question. There's a view held quietly that the real decisions aren't made in Canberra at all. They're made in boardrooms, global forums, institutions with no Australian flag, the World Economic Forum, multinationals, global investment funds. Now, I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is it's a global policy consensus. Both major parties signed up long ago. When you vote Labor or Liberal, you're not choosing a direction. You're choosing the speed. Faster or slightly slower. Always in that same direction. The trust data confirms it. Have a look at it. Only half of Australians feel most people can be trusted, down from 61% in 2020. Only 52% believe the justice system can be trusted. When half the country doesn't trust the institution that holds society together, that is not a political cycle. That is a slow motion collapse of the social contract. So when you see people turning to One Nation, understand it's about more than policy. It's about the feeling that the nation is being steered by people who don't live in it. They don't love it. And they don't answer to you.
Word is my bond.
Has your word ever been your bond?
Sarah.
I believe that when you go to an election and you make commitments, you should stick to them.
No, we've changed our position.
But what's changed, Prime Minister?
Here's what this says about Australians. One Nation is now the most popular party amongst young Australian women aged between 18 and 34. Feel free to fact check that. That demolishes 30-year media narrative. When a party polls 23% nationally and leads among women, you have to stop calling it a fringe and ask what it represents. It says Australians are practical. They care about whether they can afford a home, whether their power bill is manageable, whether their country is still recognisable. They are tired of being lectured about diversity while their living standards decline. Tired of being called a racist for noticing the system isn't working. Now, it says something the major parties should be terrified of. Australians are no longer afraid of being called names. For 30 years, the political class has used one weapon, the accusation of racism. Call someone a racist, the conversation ends. They shut up. They retreat. That weapon has stopped working. When millions of Australians are willing to vote for a party branded racist for 3 decades, it means people have decided being called a bad person is less painful than watching their country slip away. That is a political earthquake. Now, here's what I actually think. I don't know if One Nation has the answers. The forces driving all of this mass immigration, housing, unaffordability, the erosion of trust, the hollowing out of regional communities are bigger than any single government. They're global, they're structural, and they're profitable to a class who will never stand in a rental queue or watch their town's local bank close. But a political system that cuts funding for wounded veterans while finding money for non-citizen healthcare has lost its moral compass. A government that breaks its promise on negative gearing, scraps the Salomon program, defunds Invictus Australia. That government is not governing, it's gaslighting. Whether you love Pauline Hanson or despise her, she is a symptom of a deeper sickness. She didn't create the anger. She harvests a field the major parties fertilized with decades of neglect. Until they understand that, the center will keep unraveling. Maybe no party is coming to make the necessary changes. I don't know. Maybe the agenda isn't being set in Canberra at all. Possible. Maybe it's been set in places they don't have elections, global institutions, corporate boardrooms, forums, where the people making decisions about your life have never met you and never will. And maybe Labor and Liberal are just the friendly faces hired to sell you that agenda while pretending you still have a choice. Maybe One Nation can't fix it either. I don't know. But at least they're naming the problem. At least they're standing up and saying this is broken. And in a landscape where both major parties insist everything is fine while your life gets harder, just naming the problem is an act of rebellion. Australia is not a marketplace. It's not a labor pool for global capital. It is a nation, a home, and a home doesn't work when the people living in it feel like guests. My question to you is not who will you vote for? My question is, do you feel represented by the people in power? Because if the answer is no, and for millions and millions of Australians it is, then the system is already broken. The only thing left is who fixes it, and whether the people who broke it are capable of being part of the solution. Maybe they're not. Maybe the next chapter hasn't been written yet. Maybe it will be written by people who are wide awake. And that's what this channel is for. If you're tired of being managed and you want to have the conversations that the polite class won't have, then hit subscribe. My name is Thomas, and this is the Thomas Cut. I'll see you on the next one.